Oliver Hart was a billionaire who had everything except the one thing he wanted most, his son's hearing. 8-year-old Shaw had been born deaf, and his mother Catherine died during childbirth. Oliver spent millions flying to specialists across the world. Johns Hopkins, Switzerland, Tokyo, every expert said the same thing. Irreversible, nothing we can do, accept it. But Oliver couldn't accept it. His wife's death haunted him. If only he'd chosen a different hospital, demanded better care, maybe Catherine would still be alive and Shaw would be different. The guilt crushed him, so he did what he knew best. He spent money, writing checks and chasing hope across continents. The answer he desperately sought wouldn't come from a hospital. It would come from Victoria Dyer, a 27-year-old maid with no medical training, just a heart full of faith and bills she couldn't pay. Victoria took the job at the Hart mansion because her grandmother was 3 months behind on nursing home payments. After raising Victoria since her parents died in a car accident, her grandmother now lay in a facility that threatened to transfer her to a state home if the bills weren't paid. Victoria needed this paycheck desperately. Mrs. Patterson, the head housekeeper, was clear: "You'll clean. You'll stay quiet." Mr. Hart doesn't like disruptions, especially around his son. The last girl tried to help. She was gone within a week. The mansion was enormous but suffocating. Silence hung everywhere like something dead and unburied. Servants moved without speaking. No music, no television, no laughter. Just heavy, crushing quiet. Then Victoria saw Shaw, a small boy arranging toy cars on the marble staircase. What caught her attention was how he kept touching his right ear, wincing each time. She'd seen that look before with her cousin Marcus, who'd been deaf for 6 years until a simple procedure removed a blockage and restored his hearing. Days passed. Victoria watched Shaw sit alone in the sunroom, a desperately lonely child pressing his hands against windows, watching a world that moved without him. She noticed how he'd look at his father when Oliver walked past without stopping, how his shoulders would sink lower. How he touched his ear over and over, in pain, and no one noticed anymore. She started leaving him small gifts, a paper bird, candy in gold foil. He left her drawings and notes. They developed their own language of signs and gestures. Slowly, he began signaling, safe, around her. Mrs. Patterson warned her, "I've seen you with the boy. Mr. Hart has rules. Staff doesn't get close. You're here to clean, not to fix what can't be fixed. If he finds out, you'll be gone. No references, no second chances." That night Victoria held her Bible close. "Lord, I can't lose this job, but I can't ignore what I'm seeing." She thought about her grandmother, the bills, the paycheck. But she also thought about Shaw's pain and what she'd seen in his ear. The next morning changed everything. Victoria heard a muffled cry and found Shaw on a stone bench, hands pressed against his ear, tears streaming silently down his face. She knelt beside him and signed, "Can I look? I'll be gentle." He hesitated, then leaned forward. "Trust." Victoria tilted his head toward the light and saw it clearly, something dark and dense, deep inside his ear canal, bigger than before. How had every specialist missed this? She signed, "There's something in your ear that shouldn't be there. We need to tell your father." Panic exploded across his face. "No doctors. They hurt me, always hurt, never help." Victoria's heart shattered. 8 years of specialists, 8 years of procedures, 8 years of pain with no relief. He'd learned that help meant suffering. For 3 days, Victoria couldn't sleep. She knew what she'd seen. She knew what it meant. But who was she? A maid with no training, no right to touch that boy. If she was wrong, she'd go to prison. If she was right but Oliver found out she'd acted without permission, she'd lose everything: her job, her income, her grandmother's care. She thought about her brother Daniel, dead at 14 because they couldn't afford doctors. She'd promised herself that day she'd never stand by while a child suffered. But this was a billionaire's son, and she was nobody. "Lord, I'm scared," she whispered. "But if this is what you're asking." Her grandmother's words echoed. "God doesn't call the equipped, child. He equips the called." Victoria made her decision. If Shaw showed pain again, she would act. The next evening, Oliver was away. Victoria heard a thump and found Shaw on the hallway floor, curled up, face contorted in agony, silent tears streaming. "I'm here, baby." She cradled his head, tilted it toward the light. The dark mass was clearly visible, swollen and pressing against his ear canal. Her hands trembled as she pulled out sterilized tweezers. Lord, guide my hands. Shaw looked at her, scared but trusting. She signed with one hand. I won't hurt you. I promise. Gently, carefully, she moved the tweezers into his ear canal. She could feel it, dense and sticky. She hooked it, pulled. Resistance. She pulled again. Slow, careful. Then release. The dark mass slid free into her palm. Years of buildup that had stolen his hearing. Shaw gasped. A real, audible gasp. His hand flew to his ear, eyes going impossibly wide. He sat up, looking around like he'd never seen the hallway before. He pointed at the grandfather clock that had ticked his whole life but he'd never heard. Tick, he whispered. Victoria's tears fell. Yes, baby, that's the clock. You can hear it. Shaw touched his throat, felt the vibration. His eyes filled with wonder and hope. His mouth opened again, forming the first real word he'd ever spoken. Dad. Then footsteps. Heavy, fast. Oliver Hart stood in the doorway, face white, eyes locked on his son and the blood on Victoria's hands. What have you done? He rushed forward, pushing Victoria aside. What did she do to you? Shaw flinched at the sound. So loud, so sharp. But then, Dad, I can hear you. Oliver froze. What? Shaw touched his father's face. Your voice. Is that your voice? Oliver's legs buckled, but then his eyes landed on the blood, the tweezers, the dark mass in Victoria's palm. Terror overtook wonder. Security. Now. 2 guards appeared. Get her away from my son. Sir, please, Victoria said. I didn't hurt him. Look. This was inside his ear. This is why he couldn't hear. You're not a doctor. Oliver roared. You could have killed him. The guards grabbed Victoria's arms. Shaw screamed. Actually screamed. No, don't take her. The sound of his son's voice stopped Oliver cold. But fear was too strong. Take her to the security office. Call the police. As they dragged Victoria away, she looked back at Shaw. It's okay. You're going to be okay. Shaw sobbed. Loud, messy sobs. The first sounds of grief he'd ever made. At the hospital, doctors swarmed. Tests, scans, examinations. Oliver paced, his mind spinning. His son was speaking, hearing, responding to sounds. Impossible. Doctor. Matthews called Oliver into his office and slid a folder across the desk. This is your son's scan from 3 years ago. Oliver opened it. There, circled in red. Dense obstruction noted in right ear canal. Recommend immediate removal. Oliver's blood turned to ice. Someone saw this. Yes, but there's no follow-up scheduled. Your account was flagged for ongoing treatment protocol. They'd known. They'd seen the blockage and left it there because his money was too profitable. They kept his son deaf on purpose. Oliver stood. He had a maid to find and a lifetime of apologies to make. Victoria sat alone in the security office, praying for Shaw. The door opened. Oliver Hart stood there, eyes red, face broken. Victoria. Her name spoken softly, reverently. Mr. Hart, I can explain. Don't. He walked toward her and fell to his knees. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The doctors knew, he said, voice cracking. They saw the blockage years ago. They left it there because my money was too good to cure. I trusted credentials and degrees in expensive hospitals. I threw millions at my son's problem and never once stopped to actually look at him. He looked up at her. But you did. You saw him when no one else bothered. I just loved him, sir. That's all. No, that's everything. I've spent 8 years trying to buy a miracle, and God sent one through the woman I hired to clean my floors. They walked back to Shaw's hospital room together. The boy sat on the bed with headphones on, listening to music for the first time, face full of wonder. When he saw them, he ran straight to Victoria and wrapped his arms around her. Thank you, he said in his rough, unpracticed, beautiful voice. Victoria knelt and held him tight. You were always worth hearing, baby. Always. Shaw turned to his father. Dad, I can hear your heart. It's beating fast. Oliver dropped to his knees and pulled his son close. For the first time in 8 years, Shaw heard his father cry. And Victoria, standing quietly beside them, finally let herself breathe. God had answered her prayer. Not with money, not with medicine, but with willing hands and a faithful heart. Sometimes that's all a miracle needs.